The Valkyrie ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. There were so many that they blocked out the sun over half the planet. People looked up and knew, without being told, that everything was about to change. The invasion broadcast came in every language at once. A massive alien face filled every screen on Earth. Grand Marshal Beccanol spoke with a voice like grinding stone. His message was simple. Humanity would surrender or humanity would die. They had 12 hours to decide. The governments of Earth tried to fight. They launched everything they had. Nuclear missiles, plasma cannons, railguns, laser batteries. The weapons Earth had built to fight each other now turned toward the sky. For 6 hours, humanity threw everything at the Valkyrie fleet. Nothing worked. The alien shields absorbed every blast. Their return fire was precise and terrible. One shot from a Valkyrie destroyer could vaporize an entire city. They hit military bases first, then power plants, then anything that looked like it might be used for resistance. The bombardment lasted 5 hours. When it stopped, the silence was worse than the noise had been. Admiral Jiang Wei watched from the bridge of the carrier, indomitable as the Valkyrie troop ships descended. He was 53 years old and had never lost a battle until today. His fleet was scattered, his orders meaningless, his weapons useless. He looked at his crew and saw the same question in every face. "What do we do now?" "Evacuate," he said quietly. "Get as many people off Earth as we can. Take the colony ships, the medical transports, anything that can fly. Head for the outer colonies. Scatter. Hide." He paused. Survive? It took 6 more days for Earth to fall completely. The Valkyrie landed in every major city. Their soldiers were 8 feet tall, covered in armor that looked like living metal. They moved through the streets, rounding up anyone who resisted. Humans fought back with rifles, with makeshift bombs, with their bare hands. It didn't matter. For every Valkyrie soldier that fell, 100 humans died. Sarah Chun was in her laboratory when the Valkyrie came. She was a xenobiologist, one of the best in the world. She'd spent her career studying alien life from distant moons, trying to understand how life could exist in impossible places. Now she understood that some alien life didn't want to be understood. It wanted to conquer. The Valkyrie soldiers smashed through her lab door. They grabbed her by the arms and dragged her into the street. There were thousands of others there, all being sorted into groups. The Valkyrie had translators now, small devices that turned their harsh language into something humans could understand. "You are scientists," one of them said, pointing at Sarah's group. "You will work. The rest will learn obedience." They took Sarah and 200 other scientists to a facility outside the city. It had been a research center before. Now it was something else. The Valkyrie commander there was named Jack Thar. He was smaller than the other Valkyrie, with scars across his face that suggested he'd earned his position through violence. "You will help us," Jack Thar told them. "You will use your knowledge to make this planet useful to us. You will develop better crops, better medicines, better resources. If you refuse, we will kill 10 humans for every day you do not work. If you work slowly, we will kill 5 humans for every day you waste. Do you understand?" Sarah looked at the others. They were terrified. She was terrified. But she also felt something else, something small and bright and angry burning in her chest. She nodded. "We understand," she said. The work was hard. The Valkyrie wanted everything. They wanted to know how to grow Earth crops on other worlds. They wanted human medical technology. They wanted to strip Earth of everything valuable and leave nothing behind. Sarah and the others worked 18-hour days, barely fed, never allowed to rest properly. But Sarah noticed something. The Valkyrie were efficient, but they weren't creative. They could follow plans, but they couldn't imagine new ones. They could use human technology, but they didn't really understand it. And they were arrogant. They believed humans were broken, defeated, ready to be reshaped into obedient servants. At night, in the barracks where the scientists slept, Sarah began to whisper to the others. They could help the Valkyrie, yes, but they could also help themselves. They could hide things in the data they collected. They could build backdoors into the systems they created. They could work slowly, carefully, making everything look normal while they prepared for something else. Prepared for what? Asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a physicist who'd lost his entire family in the invasion. I don't know yet, Sarah admitted. But I know we're not broken. They think we are, but we're not. We just need time. 3 months into the occupation, the Valkyrie made their first major mistake. They gathered 10,000 humans in the ruins of Beijing and forced them to watch as Decanol gave a speech. He told them that humanity's governments were dissolved, that human languages would be phased out in favor of Valkyrie, that human history would be forgotten, replaced with the truth of Valkyrie superiority, that within 1 generation, humans would forget they had ever been free. You are not a species anymore, Decanol said. You are a resource. Accept this, and you will live. Resist, and you will die forgotten. In the crowd, a woman started singing. It was an old song, one that Sarah remembered from childhood. Others joined in. Then more. Soon 10,000 voices were singing together, drowning out Decanol's words. The Valkyrie opened fire. 300 humans died in 30 seconds. The singing stopped, but that night, across the world, in camps and cells and labor facilities, humans sang the same song. Quietly, carefully, where the Valkyrie couldn't hear. And they remembered who they were. The Valkyrie had conquered Earth, but they hadn't conquered humanity. Not yet. And maybe, Sarah thought as she lay in her bunk that night, not ever. 20 years passed. A generation grew up knowing only Valkyrie rule. Children were born in camps and taught Valkyrie language before they learned their parents' tongues. The cities of Earth were rebuilt in Valkyrie style, all harsh angles and cold metal. Museums were emptied, books were burned, and human history became something whispered in secret. But whispers can be powerful things. Sarah Chun was 43 now. Her hair had started going gray, and her hands shook sometimes from years of malnutrition and overwork. She still worked in the same facility, still did the research the Valkyrie demanded. But she'd become something else too, something the Valkyrie hadn't noticed. She'd become a teacher. Every scientist who came through the facility learned 2 jobs. The real work, which kept the Valkyrie satisfied, and the hidden work, which might someday matter. They encoded messages in genetic sequences. They hid information in mathematical formulas. They built tools the Valkyrie thought were for agriculture or medicine, but which could be repurposed for other things. They talked to other facilities through official channels, but the real messages were buried in the data the Valkyrie never bothered to check closely. Across the solar system, the same thing was happening. On Mars, in the terraforming stations, human engineers built systems with secret backdoors. On Europa, in the mining facilities, workers mapped every corridor and security checkpoint. On Titan, in the fuel refineries, technicians learned exactly how much damage a single explosion could do. The Valkyrie saw obedient workers. They didn't see the resistance growing underneath. Marcus Webb had been 24 when Earth fell. He'd been a lieutenant on a destroyer that got cut in half during the last battle. He'd survived by luck and spent the next 20 years in labor camps, fixing Valkyrie ships and learning everything he could about how they worked. Now he was 44, scarred and lean, with eyes that never stopped watching. The camp on Ganymede was one of the worst. 5,000 humans, all considered valuable enough to keep alive, but dangerous enough to watch constantly. They worked 16-hour shifts repairing Valkyrie military equipment. The guards were brutal. Food was scarce. Hope was supposed to be impossible. But Marcus had learned something important. The Valkyrie rotated their guards every few months to prevent them from getting too familiar with the prisoners. They thought this made the camps more secure. They were wrong. It meant the guards never learned who the real troublemakers were. It meant Marcus could move through the camp, talking to people, organizing, without anyone noticing. There was one guard who was different. His name was HFY, and something about him seemed wrong for a Valkyrie. He didn't beat prisoners for fun. He sometimes gave extra food rations to children. Once, Marcus saw him hesitate before punishing a worker who collapsed from exhaustion. The other Valkyrie noticed too. They mocked HFY, called him weak, said he wasn't fit to be a soldier. Marcus realized that even the Valkyrie had outcasts, individuals who didn't fit their brutal culture. One night, Marcus took a risk. He approached HFY when no other guards were watching. "Why do you help us?" Marcus asked in basic Valkyrie, learned from years of listening. HFY's massive head turned toward him. For a moment, Marcus thought he'd made a fatal mistake. Then HFY spoke quietly. "Because this is wrong," the guard said. "My people believe strength is everything. But I have seen strong species fall and weak ones survive. I think maybe we do not understand what strength really is. Will you help us more?" Marcus asked. "I cannot," HFY said. "I am watched as much as you are. More, perhaps. But I will not stop you if you help yourselves." 2 weeks later, a supply ship arrived at the camp. It was supposed to contain medicine. Instead, the Valkyrie discovered it was carrying weapons. Stolen from a military depot on Mars, they traced the theft to HFY, who had altered shipping manifests to make the diversion possible. The execution was public. They made every prisoner in the camp watch. HFY stood alone in the center of the yard while the camp commander read his crimes. Betrayal of the Dominion. Aiding enemies. Weakness. "Have you anything to say?" the commander asked. HFY looked at the prisoners. "I say that a people who torture the helpless and call it strength have forgotten what those words mean. And I say that you will lose this war you don't know you're fighting." They shot him. The body fell and didn't move. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Marcus started walking forward. Not running, just walking calmly toward the commander. Other prisoners followed. 10, then 50, then 100. They had no weapons. They knew what would happen. They walked anyway. "Stop or we fire," the commander ordered. They didn't stop. The Valkyrie opened fire. Marcus felt the impact before he heard the sound, a burning punch to his shoulder that spun him around. He hit the ground and saw others falling around him. The shooting went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it stopped, 37 humans were dead. 100 more were wounded. The survivors were beaten and thrown into solitary confinement. Marcus spent 3 days alone in a cell, bleeding, wondering if HFY's sacrifice had meant anything. It had. The riot had been recorded by the camp's security system. A maintenance worker named Chen Jiao, no relation to Sarah, had access to those systems. He copied the footage and sent it through the hidden network, encoded in a routine maintenance report. Within a week, every resistance cell in the solar system had seen it. They saw humans walking unarmed towards certain death. Not for a tactical advantage or a chance at escape, but because watching their only ally die alone was something they refused to accept. They saw the Valkyrie kill them. And they saw, in that moment, the difference between the two species made visible. The Valkyrie believed strength was the ability to inflict suffering. Humans believed strength was the ability to endure it without breaking. Messages started flowing through the hidden networks. Not plans yet, but something more important. Hope. The knowledge that others felt the same way. That the time for patience might be ending. that maybe it was better to die fighting than to live as slaves forever on Earth. In her laboratory, Sarah Chung received a message encoded in a genetic sequence. It was from Marcus Webb, somehow alive, somehow still fighting. The message was simple: how long until we're ready? Sarah looked at the 20 years of preparation, the tools and knowledge and networks they'd built in secret. She thought about her son, born in the camps, now 19, and working in a factory he'd never chosen. She thought about Shekval, who died because he had the courage to be kind. She thought about the 37 humans who'd walked toward death with their eyes open. She encoded her reply and sent it through the network. It would take weeks to reach everyone, but it would reach them. Soon, she wrote. Very soon. The rebellion didn't begin with a declaration or a coordinated attack. It began on a Tuesday, just like the invasion had, with small acts of defiance that grew into something the Valkyrie couldn't control. On Mars, the terraforming workers sealed themselves inside the atmospheric processors. They sent one message to the Valkyrie garrison: leave Mars within 24 hours or we destroy everything. We'll die, but you'll lose 50 years of work. The Valkyrie didn't believe them. Humans had been obedient for 2 decades. This was a bluff. It wasn't a bluff. When Valkyrie soldiers tried to force their way in, the workers triggered the systems they'd been secretly modifying for years. The explosion could be seen from orbit. 3,000 humans died instantly. The atmospheric processors were destroyed. Mars would have to be terraformed from scratch. The Valkyrie were still processing this when Europa erupted. Every mining camp on the moon revolted at once. Prisoners armed with mining tools and improvised weapons attacked their guards. Most died within minutes, but some camps were taken. For the first time in 20 years, humans controlled territory. Not much, just a few facilities on a frozen moon, but it was theirs. On Earth, power grids went dark as technicians activated the backdoors they built into every system. Cities fell into darkness. Valkyrie bases lost power. Communication systems failed. The Valkyrie had been so confident that they'd never bothered to learn Earth's infrastructure. They just forced humans to maintain it. Now those same humans were tearing it down. Grand Marshal Decanol watched reports flooding in from across the solar system. 20 years of peace, and suddenly chaos everywhere. He couldn't understand it. They'd broken humanity. They'd crushed every rebellion. They'd killed everyone who resisted. How could this be happening? His intelligence officer had an answer. They never stopped resisting. They just got better at hiding it. Everything we thought they were building for us, they were also building for themselves. Every system has a weakness. Every facility has a plan for revolt. They've been preparing for this for 20 years. Then we will crush them again, Decanol said. Send the 4th Fleet to Sol system. Kill everyone who resists. Kill 10 for everyone who fights back. Make them remember what happens when they defy us. The 4th Fleet arrived 3 weeks later. 200 ships, the largest Valkyrie force ever sent against a single species. They began with Mars, orbital bombardment of the remaining settlements. Then Europa, landing troops to retake the occupied facilities. Then Earth, targeting the darkened cities where the power had gone out. But something was different this time. The humans had ships. They weren't good ships. They were mining vessels with weapons welded on, cargo haulers converted to fighters, old defense satellites reactivated and repurposed. Marcus Webb commanded them from a repaired corvette that barely held atmosphere. His fleet was outgunned, out-armored, and outnumbered 5-1. He didn't care. The Battle of the Asteroid Belt lasted 3 weeks. The Valkyrie expected a quick victory. They got a nightmare. Human ships used the asteroids as cover, ambushing Valkyrie vessels and retreating before they could respond. They attacked supply lines, stranding Valkyrie ships without fuel or ammunition. They used suicide runs, small ships ramming into large ones, sacrificing themselves to cripple enemy destroyers. The Valkyrie had never fought an enemy like this. Every other species they'd conquered had eventually made the rational calculation that survival was better than victory. Humans didn't seem to care about survival. They cared about hitting back. Captain Velther commanded the destroyer Crushing Dawn. He was a veteran of 50 battles and had never been defeated. He watched a human shuttle, damaged and leaking air, accelerate toward his ship. He could see the human pilot through the viewport, a woman with blood on her face, smiling. "Destroy it," he ordered. His weapons officer fired. The shuttle exploded, but debris from the explosion hit the Crushing Dawn's engine section, damaging it badly enough that the ship had to withdraw from combat. "She knew she would die," Velther said quietly. Why did she smile? His first officer had no answer. On Earth, Sarachem wasn't fighting with ships or weapons. She was fighting with knowledge. The biological research she'd been forced to do for the Valkyrie had taught her everything about their physiology. Now she used that knowledge to create a virus, something that would make Valkyrie soldiers sick enough to be combat ineffective, but not deadly. She wasn't a killer. She was a scientist. But she would do what was necessary. The virus was released in water supplies near Valkyrie bases. Within a week, 30% of the occupation forces were too ill to fight. The Valkyrie medical teams couldn't understand it. The disease seemed designed specifically for their biology. Like someone who knew them intimately had created a weapon just for them. Someone had. The ground fighting was brutal. Humans attacked Valkyrie positions with everything they had. The Valkyrie were better trained, better equipped, and stronger. But humans fought like they had nothing to lose, because many of them didn't. They'd spent 20 years losing everything slowly. Dying quickly seemed like an improvement. Marcus's son, born in the camps, died in a raid on a Valkyrie command post. He was 19. Marcus didn't learn about it until a week later. He sat in his command chair, staring at nothing, feeling the grief try to pull him under. His communications officer, a young woman named Rita, who'd been born after the invasion, spoke quietly. "Sir, the Fourth Fleet is retreating from the belt. We won." Marcus looked up. "How many did we lose?" 63 ships. About 4,000 people. They'd started with 100 ships. More than half were gone. But the Valkyrie had lost 47 ships out of 200, and they were retreating. For the first time in 20 years, the Valkyrie had been beaten in a major battle. "Send a message to all human forces," Marcus said. "Tell them we proved something today. Tell them we can win." But the cost was staggering. The Valkyrie bombardment had killed millions on Earth. Mars was a graveyard. Europa's facilities were in ruins. The human resistance was winning battles, but losing people faster than they could afford. Decanol knew this. He sent a message to every human settlement in the system. "You have fought well. You have proven you are not weak. But you are bleeding. Every day, thousands of you die. Surrender now, and we will show mercy. Continue fighting, and we will exterminate you completely. You cannot win this war." The message reached Marcus on his ship. He thought about his dead son. He thought about the thousands who died in the belt. He thought about whether Decanol was right, whether this was just prolonging the inevitable. Then he thought about Shekval, who died because he believed humans were worth saving. He thought about the woman who'd smiled as she rammed her shuttle into a Valkyrie destroyer. He thought about 20 years of quiet resistance, of people who'd suffered and endured, and never forgot who they were. He recorded his response and broadcast it across every channel, so that every human in the system could hear it. "Grand Marshal Decanol, you're right that we're bleeding. You're right that we can't win a traditional war. But you're wrong about what victory means to us. We're not fighting to conquer you. We're fighting to prove we can't be conquered. And every day we survive, every battle we win, every time we make you pay for occupying our worlds, we win. You can kill us all, maybe, but you'll never make us kneel again. That's our victory. That's what you can never take from us." The message spread. On Earth, in the camps, in the ruins of the cities, humans heard it and understood. They were losing, yes, but they were also winning the only war that mattered. The war for their own souls. The Valkyrie didn't understand, but they were beginning to be afraid. The war dragged on for 30 more years. It wasn't one continuous battle, but a grinding, exhausting struggle that never really ended. The Valkyrie would crush a rebellion in one place, only to have 3 more spring up somewhere else. They'd retake a facility, and it would be sabotaged from within weeks later. They'd execute resistors, and their children would grow up to fight twice as hard. Sarah-chan lived to see her son join the resistance, then watched him die in a raid when he was 28. She kept working, kept teaching, kept building the tools that others would use to fight. She was 63 now, old for someone who'd lived through the occupation. Her hands shook constantly. Her eyes were failing, but her mind was still sharp, and she still had work to do. The turning point came from an unexpected direction. The other species under Valkyrie rule had been watching humanity's rebellion. The Valkyrie had conquered the Decalar 40 years before Earth fell. They'd been a peaceful species, philosophical and artistic. They'd surrendered after one battle, accepting that resistance was futile. But they'd watched humans fight for 50 years. They'd watched humans lose battles and keep fighting. They'd watched humans die by the billions and never surrender. And slowly, something that had died in the Decalar began to wake up. The Decalar rebellion started small, just like humanity's had. Sabotage, slowdowns, quiet acts of defiance. But it spread. The Valkyrie, stretched thin trying to control humanity, couldn't respond fast enough. Within a year, the Decalar were in open revolt. Then the Kershal joined, a species that had been conquered a century ago. Then the Vexenal. Then others. The Valkyrie Dominion, which had stood unchallenged for 3,000 years, was suddenly fighting wars on 20 fronts. And all because one stubborn species had refused to accept the mathematics of conquest. Grand Marshal Beckenol was 80 now, ancient for a Valkyrie. He'd spent 50 years trying to break humanity and had failed. Now his empire was crumbling, and he knew why. Humans had shown the other species something. The Valkyrie had worked hard to make them forget that the conquered could fight back. He sent a message to Marcus Webb, who was now 74 and commanded the human resistance from a hidden base on Titan. The message was simple. Meet with me, alone. We will discuss terms. Marcus's advisors thought it was a trap. Marcus thought it might be too. He went anyway. If there was even a chance to end this war, he had to take it. They met on Luna, in the ruins of the old human colony. Decanol came with 2 guards. Marcus came with Rita, his second in command, who was now 50 and had never known a day of peace in her life. They met in what had once been an observation deck, looking out at Earth. The planet was scarred. Continents showed the marks of bombardment. The oceans were darker than they'd been. But there were lights on the night side, cities rebuilding, human civilization slowly recovering. The Valkyrie no longer controlled Earth. They'd been pushed back to a few fortified positions. "You have cost me everything," Decanol said without preamble. "My empire is falling. My people are dying on a dozen worlds. All because you would not accept peace." "That wasn't peace," Marcus said. "That was slavery. And you chose this instead." Decanol gestured at Earth. "Billions dead. Your world in ruins. Your species scattered and broken. Was it worth it?" Marcus looked at the old alien who'd conquered his world a lifetime ago. He thought about his son, dead at 19. He thought about the billions who died in the war. He thought about Sarah Chun, who'd lived to see 63 years of struggle. He thought about Shekval, who died because he tried to do the right thing. Yes, Marcus said simply, because we're still human. You tried to turn us into something else, something that would accept chains and call it peace. You failed. We're still us. That was worth any price. I do not understand you, Decanol admitted. Any of you. We offered you life. You chose death. We offered you order. You chose chaos. We offered you a place in our empire. You chose destruction instead. That's because you think those were the choices, Rita said. She'd been quiet until now, but something in Decanol's words made her speak. We didn't choose between life and death. We chose between existing and living. You can kill us, but you can't make us stop being human. That's what you never understood. Decanol was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. What are your terms? Complete withdrawal from Sol System, Marcus said. Recognition of human sovereignty. Reparations for damages. Release of all prisoners. And a guarantee that you'll never return. And if I refuse, then we keep fighting. Maybe we lose. Maybe you kill every last human. But the other species are watching. They're already fighting. How many wars can you win at once? How long before your own people decide the cost is too high? Decanol looked at Earth again. He'd conquered it 50 years ago in 11 days. He'd lost it over 50 years, piece by piece, life by life. The math was simple now. The Valkyrie could keep fighting and watch their empire collapse, or they could accept that humanity had won the only victory that mattered. I accept your terms, he said. The treaty was signed a month later. The Valkyrie withdrew from human space. They left behind a devastated solar system and a human species that had lost half its population. But they also left behind something else. They left behind humans who'd proven they couldn't be broken. Sarah Chun lived to see the treaty signed. She died a week later, peaceful in her sleep. She was 63 years old and had spent 43 of those years fighting one way or another. Her funeral was attended by thousands. They came from Earth, from Mars, from Europa, from the scattered colonies. They came to honor someone who'd never stopped resisting. Marcus Webb lived another 5 years. He spent them helping rebuild, teaching the next generation about what they'd fought for and why it mattered. He died at 79, sitting in a chair on his small farm on Earth, looking at a sky that was finally clear of enemy ships. Rita took over after Marcus died. She was 55 and had a different kind of war to fight. The war of rebuilding. The war of remembering. The war of making sure that what they'd sacrificed for wasn't forgotten. 50 years after the treaty, Earth was recovering. The population was growing. The cities were rebuilt. The colonies were expanding. A new generation was growing up free, something 3 generations before them had never known. They learned about the occupation in school. They learned about the resistance. They learned about Sarah Chun and Marcus Webb and Shekval and all the others who'd fought and died. They learned about the price of freedom. But more importantly, they learned about what their species had proven. Not that humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. They'd proven something simpler and more important. They'd proven that some things matter more than survival. That dignity is worth fighting for. That you can break human bodies but not human will. The Valkyrie dominion continued to decline. The species they'd conquered continued to rebel. Within a century, the empire that had stood for 3,000 years was gone. The Valkyrie still existed, but they were just another species now. No longer conquerors, and on Earth, in the rebuilt cities and growing colonies, humans looked up at the stars and knew something the Valkyrie had learned too late. That you could conquer a world, but you couldn't conquer a people who refused to be conquered. The strongest armor and biggest guns meant nothing against a will that wouldn't break. Humanity had been conquered. Humanity had suffered. Humanity had bled and died and lost billions. But humanity had never surrendered.